For over 35 years, Todd Garner has overseen blockbuster films like Con Air, Anger Management, Triple X, 13 Going on 30, and the Mortal Kombat franchise.
Why are they letting you make these movies?
Join Todd as he shares tips and stories from the front lines of producing in Hollywood.
I'm Adam Sandler.
I'm Rebel Wilson.
This is Jeff Probst.
I'm Kaylee Cuoco.
I'm Eli Roth.
This is Marlon Wayans.
Hey, it's Ed Helms.
This is Shay Mitchell.
Hey everybody, this is Kevin James, and this is The Producer's Guide.
The Producer's Guide.
The Producer's Guide.
The Producer's Guide with Todd Garner.
Todd Garner.
Todd Garner.
Todd Garner.
What a combination.
Welcome to the Producer's Guide podcast. I'm Todd Garner. In today's episode, we have Chief Creative Officer of AGBO, Angela Russo-Otstot, who's been instrumental in establishing AGBO as a trailblazer in interconnected storytelling, creating universes that span various forms of media. As she oversees AGBO's impressive slate of projects, Angela ensures that each film, series, and video game maintains creative quality and brand cohesion. She's known for her work on Amazon's hit series Citadel and has produced notable titles like Electric State and The Gray Man. Join us as we deep dive into Angela's journey, insights on the industry, the future of creative content, and why her company is called AGBO. Enjoy. All right, I am here with Angela Russo-Otstot. Hello, how are you today?
Hi, Todd. I'm good. It's so nice to be with you.
You are running, essentially, as the CCO of AGBO. That company is a juggernaut in everything technology, television, AI, movies. You guys are dominating kind of every media right now. Are you doing microdramas yet?
We're not doing one yet, but like everybody else, we're interested.
Before we get to this big job, which you have candidly said you were surprised that your brothers even asked you since you primarily came up as a writer, you grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and you went to Syracuse University. Tell me, growing up, what is in the water in Cleveland that all the Russos were drinking that you guys have just become such successful filmmakers?
We came from a family of immigrants, in Cleveland, and Cleveland as a city can get a bad rap. And so the people who live there have extra love, for doing it justice. And, I think are extra motivated to prove themselves. We have an underdog mentality. And so I think that was a big part of our collective drive growing up. We saw it in our grandparents and our parents and sort of passed on to us. And, we were fortunate, being the generation that we were, to have more opportunity to pursue things that, we were passionate about instead of, signing up for life to do something that needed to be done, in order to help the next generation. And so we were really blessed in that regard. And, the fact that I got to go to Syracuse and study theater was pretty remarkable. So,
first of all, what was the order of when the siblings decided this is the entertainment business was for them? Yeah. Was it brothers first and then you, or you first and then brothers? What was the order of people going, I'm doing this?
It was brothers first. There's a bit of an age gap between us.
Okay.
And so I was probably I was 14, 15 years old. They were in college. Anthony had already graduated his undergrad at University of Pennsylvania, and he was back in Cleveland in law school, actually, at Case Western Reserve University, because we come from a family of lawyers, and he's the firstborn, and he was, following in footsteps. And he and Joe made a collective decision to go and shoot an independent film. And I remember the day that they informed my father that that's what they wanted to do with the rest of their lives. And it was a hard pill to swallow for him. My brother dropped out of law school and then they pursued their first film, which was called Pieces. And I was in that film as an extra. We all played different parts. I mean, if you look at the end credits of it, nobody can ever look at the end credits of it. It's never been released. But like I would say, out of 100 names listed, 93 are Russo. So it was fun.
Well, I'm sure your father was happy that your sister picked up the mantle and decided to pursue law. So he got one of the four.
He got one. So we have two family businesses now. We have theirs and then this one.
Perfect. Was there, growing up, a movie or a story or a book or something that got your brothers into this, or that you can remember you being gravitating towards or seeing and saying, this is something that I want to pursue?
Yeah, I think all of us were really drawn to fantasy genres when we were young. And I think it was because it was so far removed from the world that we knew in Cleveland. And, I remember Anthony especially was very drawn to Tolkien. That's where it all started for him. Joe collected comic books and, really spent the bulk of his time with his face buried in them. And so that's where it started for him. And then for me, it wasn't until later, actually, but I was still quite young. I remember going to see at the movie theater Princess Bride. And there was something about that experience for me that opened up my mind to the magic of storytelling through the cinematic experience, and it invited me into it in a way that I hadn't felt previously. And that was a big moment for me, that movie. It sticks out. Yeah.
And you went to Syracuse to study theater. When did you get the writing bug?
Probably when I was there, actually. I really enjoyed my studies. We had a program that focused on multiple disciplines and techniques, but I was really drawn to my theory classes, analysis, script analysis. I think that's where I developed a love. I read hundreds of plays, and I did go on after Syracuse to New York City, and I did another acting program there for the Meisner technique at the William Esper Studio for 2 years. And I loved that. And I came out to LA with all intentions of acting. And I got here, and it was probably longer than 3 weeks, but the way I remember it is it took probably 3 weeks for me to realize that acting in front of a camera is not for me. I am way too neurotic, and it's different in the theater. You have so much rehearsal time. It feels very safe on a dark stage. But when you're on a film set and suddenly hundreds of people are standing around you looking at you with bright lights, it's a whole different experience. And so I think the fear of that sort of catapulted me toward writing, because it was a safe place to be behind the camera. And I had a really interesting start as a writer. I had loved writing. I actually wanted to go to school for journalism initially. I was working as Anthony and Joe's assistant, and we had been on a television series that was at NBC at the time. And there was another assistant there, also from Cleveland, who was pitching around ideas with me. He had, been an inspiring screenwriter. And he pitched me an idea that I sort of latched onto and kept talking it through with him. And he said, let's write it. And I thought, I've never written a script before. He said, let's do it. And so we did it. And it was one of those that was like lightning in a bottle. And it took place in Cleveland, and it felt like home to us. And it had such a, specificity to it and unique tone. And it was an ensemble piece. And I'm really proud of it, looking back at it. And we were able to get ourselves an agent with it. And Anthony and Joe offered to produce and direct it. And we went out to market to try and sell it. And the show we were on ended up meeting its demise and going off the air early. And it was the Friday before the winter holiday break. I was working their desk, and the phone rings. And at the time, it was the president of HBO, and her office was calling for them to basically say whether or not they were going to purchase this script and develop it. So I called the other writer in. And the two of us sat on mute listening, and Anthony and Joe were in the office next to us. And she said, we'd love to pursue this. And we were yelling. I mean, you could probably hear us through the wall. And it was literally the day we were losing our jobs.
Wow.
So it was a pretty awesome moment. And that was the first time that, Anthony and Joe and I got to work together professionally. We developed, it didn't end up going, that pilot, True Blood, ended up going that year. But it was an awesome experience, and a really, I have so much gratitude that was my gateway into a writing career and writers' rooms.
And you ended up writing another thing for them called Cherry that they actually did make and direct. And your screenwriting career was going really well. And at some point, they decide to bring you over to this company that they're forming because they want a bunch of different artists, not just executives in suits. And so they bring you over. And that is sort of at the beginning of AGBO. So let's talk about AGBO. What does AGBO stand for? AGBO.
It's not an acronym. It looks like an acronym because it's such a weird word. The way that the company got named, like many startups at the time, they had enlisted some company that specializes in, assessing what your brand is going to be and giving you an appropriate name. And they had all of these like slide presentations that they were walking Anthony and Joe through, and they just couldn't latch on to any of the names that were being pitched. And this went on for a very long time. Anthony looked at Joe at one point and he said, let's just call it AGBO. And AGBO for them stems back to that time I mentioned where they decided we're going to pursue careers as filmmakers. And they ended up just like dabbling and experimenting in like other, sort of forms of storytelling and entertainment. And while they were making the film, Joe was at Case Western Reserve in a graduate acting program. And so they put on a show on campus, an improv show. And it was actually the two of them, and the third person in it is our chief innovation officer here at AGBO. We're all still together.
Wow.
And his name's Jake Goss. And I was in high school, and I ran the light board and the sound. And in order to get people to come see this improv show, they wrote a fake review of it. But the angle they took was, let's lambast this show for all of the reasons that we love it. Like, let's just have this critic tear it apart for all the reasons that, and it's just so bad that people have to come see it. And then they wanted to name this fictitious critic. So they opened up the Cleveland phone book, and they didn't get very far around the A page. And they found a name, Gozi Agbo, which is such an incredible name.
Incredible.
So they named the critic Gozi Agbo.
Wow.
And then moving forward, it just sort of stuck. Like if Joe would do a cameo in a movie, you'll see at the end it's credited as Gozi Agbo. We have an independent banner here at the company that we call Gozi Agbo Presents, which we've done, some films with emerging filmmakers such as Relic, with Natalie Erica James was through Gozi Agbo. Everything Everywhere All at Once this past year was Legend of Ochi. And so I love that Gozi Agbo lives on, and Agbo is, the company.
So your brothers came out. They were independent filmmakers at first, writers. They were very heavily influenced, if not mentored by Soderbergh.
Yeah.
Walk me through, was this idea of AGBO always in your collective consciousness, or has this evolved? And how did it evolve? Was it joining the Marvel world and the Marvel Cinematic Universe that sort of went, oh, wow, this could be much bigger and we want to be great collaborators and we want to bring in all kinds of different artists? Walk me through the evolution of AGBO from your perspective.
Yeah, I think we joke that like AGBO began around the dinner table growing up, meaning that we were from a big Italian family and conversations tended to revolve around stories, sharing stories. And there was always a healthy dialogue where everybody had a voice. And it was like, how loud can you be to get your voice in, right? But that's the world that we came from. And, we had the 4 kids in the family. We had all these extended cousins. We were always in a big, big group. Anthony and Joe, started as filmmakers as a partnership. And they are innately collaborators together. When I went to school for theater, I learned so much more about the art of collaboration and the value of, working with the collective to build something to its fullest potential. And then I worked in television. They started in television, also highly collaborative, especially in the writer's room. And so there was just this like continuing narrative throughout both of our journeys that by the time they went to Marvel, and they were about halfway through their run there of the first 4 films that they did. So I think they were there 10 years total. They were around Infinity War. They had felt that, through all these experiences, whether it was Collinwood with Soderbergh and Clooney, mentoring them, whether it was coming up, through the series that they did, Arrested Development, Community, and then even into Marvel and their work with Kevin and Lou and everybody, they really began to appreciate the sanctity of the collaborative effort. And they thought it would be incredible to identify a space that could be independent of, sort of the larger studios and organizations and infrastructures that you're tethered to when you're working, across most projects. And in this space, perhaps you could focus on developing the creative to what, the artist that we're championing wants it to be first and foremost. And as an independent company, we could then take it out, and whomever wants to raise their hand for it is raising their hand because they love it for what it is. And so it was all about like just trying to protect the creative process from bottom lines that sometimes can be at odds with the creative process. And they saw, firsthand, because Marvel did what they did so well, that was a place where they were really able to do that. They were able to do it, with Marcus and McFeely, who wrote on all the scripts that they had directed, and then, again, with Kevin and the other producers. And so that was really the impetus for them of let's go start our own company. And then, as you said earlier, we'll certainly have seasoned executives, who can help lead the way. But let's also make sure that the artist's voice is represented and that the artists we work with have an artist partner on their side. And so I love, this company's grown into a collective of there's directors, there's writers, editors, craftspeople, crew members, and seasoned executives all working together in service of these other directors and writers, which is awesome. And so that's the ethos and philosophy, that we look at ourselves as truly being a support system, for these artists, and sort of bringing our collective experiences and expertise to, really champion what it is that they're trying to say.
It's like a big Italian dinner table where everyone has a voice. That's amazing.
Right, yeah.
I mean, your relationship with Netflix, you guys are so deeply connected to Netflix, and you've made so many things for them. You're probably the most prolific producer on the top 10 list of all time. How did that relationship begin, and how has it evolved over time?
Yeah, we have done, quite a few. I can't even count now how many films in we are. But I think what we learned very early on with Netflix, and one of our first projects there that I was across, this wasn't our first project, but it was one of them, was a film called Mosul. And it was another example of a director, first-time director that we were working with, Matthew Michael Carnahan. And he wrote this script based on a journalistic piece that he had read, a true story of a local SWAT team that combated ISIS in the town of Mosul. We cast, that film, and even the actors who, didn't speak Arabic were taught to speak in the exact dialect of that town. We went and shot this movie. We shot it all in Arabic. We took great pains, to preserve the authenticity of it. We delivered the final cut to Netflix, and they said, "Thank you. We're going to now go, do our sub and dub like everybody else does." We said, "No, wait a minute. We shot it this way on purpose. We want people to, experience it this way." And to Netflix's credit, they said, "Okay," and they released it in that fashion. And it was a real moment for us of, oh my goodness, like this is a platform that sees and understands the value of, sharing stories that have global specificity and resonance for a larger audience. And for us as a company, we really focus on genre storytelling, commercial storytelling. We like the entertainment value. You can still say complex things, but in a safe way. That's a very, that film is very serious subject matter. But it invites people into it in a way that I think can transcend borders. Genre is very helpful in that regard. Everybody understands it, unless comedy is culturally specific, sometimes. But people have the same visceral reaction to horror and action. And so it felt like a real match for us that this platform, which had such massive reach, was really open to doing things in a way that at the time were not the standard. And I think we reached a real high point in 2020 when the first Extraction was released, because that was a film that was by all accounts, a Hollywood action blockbuster movie with Chris Hemsworth. He's the only Western actor in it, and 80% of the movie's in Hindi and Bangla. And it was a really wonderful, awesome moment to see those audiences celebrate it and show up. And I think that again gave us, more and more motivation to come to them with stories that we felt could really connect that global landscape.
And there's been so much conversation about Netflix buying Warner Brothers, about Warner Brothers merging with Paramount, about theatrical, about the contraction of theatrical.
Yeah.
Your brothers have a lot of box office between them in the theatrical marketplace. And you mentioned movies like Extraction, and then you have The Extraction 2, and then you have The Bluff and Electric State, all movies that could have been theatrical. Why go with a streaming service if you guys have so much power and so much box office in other work? What was the motivation to make those movies? And I'm assuming you could go anywhere with them.
Yeah.
Those movies in particular, why go with Netflix and why not try, especially with a movie like Extraction, which is so popular, it's in the worldwide top 10 of all time of Netflix, and you're making, I think, a third one now. Why streaming and not theatrical at that time?
It was guided by the same philosophy we always take, which is we have this incredible idea. We have these partners that we want to collaborate with. Let's really talk about and crystallize what it is and bring it out to the world and see who raises their hand. And I think Netflix really leaned in on that one. And because it spoke so directly to a very vibrant aspect of their subscribership. And I think that, we don't ever really develop something to say it's going to be for this or for that. We tend to, we keep ourselves open to the entire market. And, because of things that have happened, particularly COVID, we had different buyers leaning in at different times. But I certainly am of the mindset that, because I know there's lots of debate over, theatrical and whether or not, it will continue on in the way that it has. I don't know that anything is ever going to continue on in the way that it has. There's just so much optionality now, but I do firmly believe there's space for all of it. And, I'm so excited, for Doomsday and to see, that audience come back together again and have that opportunity, and it is really a global phenomenon and community that comes together to celebrate in a powerful way, which is exciting. And I also think, like you brought up The Bluff earlier, it was tricky for us because we had this incredible new collaborator, Frank Flowers, who co-wrote the script with Joe Ballerini. We loved them. And they just had such, they had a fresh take, on an authentic and grounded telling of a pirate story, authentic to the Caribbean experience, but just like subversive enough, by leaning into this woman, which again was grounded in historical accuracy, but really like twisted the tropes that we're used to.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't like this, but it is true. Female action-led films can be tough, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so can an emerging director. It was Frank's second film. And so, sometimes you're working with, and as a company, we pull ourselves all together as producers around it to say, like, this may feel like a risk or a swing, but we're here to deliver on it. And in that case, Amazon raised their hand, Amazon MGM raised their hand and said yes. And it wasn't easy for us to get a yes on that one. And Priyanka helped us immensely. She does very well on their platform. We were very excited, to go to Karl Urban to see, if he would respond to this character, and he did. He also does very well on that platform. So we had to work to put together all the right pieces to have it make best sense. Even if it made best sense creatively to us, even if it made best sense creatively to them, it still needed to make best sense, from a financial standpoint. So,
well, I love Priyanka. I've worked with her before, and I have to say that I was standing next to Karl when he said yes to The Bluff on the set of Mortal Kombat.
I love that. Oh my gosh, I am so excited for Mortal Kombat, by the way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, he
cool.
was really excited. He went right into your movie right after Mortal Kombat 2.
Ah, he
Yeah,
is
he
awesome.
even kept his same apartment that we set him up in Gold Coast.
Oh,
So
that's
yeah,
amazing.
let's talk about Netflix trying to buy Warner Brothers and Ted saying that he would honor the 45-day theatrical window, and they take K-pop Demon Hunters and they do an experiment and they put it in theater. And you guys are so well known for being really leaders in technology. We're going to get into that in a minute. As you said, you have a chief innovation officer and new distribution models. Could you now release Extraction 3 in theaters? Do you see a world where Netflix can take some of their IP or movies that could be global sensations? Because listen, yes, they're global sensations, and I've made a lot of movies for Netflix. I love that they're there, and I love that we can make movies for them. And I love having, especially some of the movies that I've made, like comedies that get hundreds of millions of views. It's amazing. But there's nothing like when all of the Avengers came back from the snap and people lost their shit in theaters and recorded it. There's nothing like that. So do you see a world, and you guys are so immersed in the leadership of Netflix, have you guys proposed or this or talked about, or maybe I'm putting the bug in your head now to talk to Ted about it? Do you see a world now where you're like, guys, Extraction 1 and 2 are like the most viewed movies in the planet ever. Let's maybe do an experiment. We'll try to pull Extraction 3 out for a theatrical experience now that you know that there's an audience for it? Or have those discussions happened at all? Or do you see a path, even not with your movies, that Netflix could do something like that?
Those discussions have not happened. Do I see a path that they could? Yes, personally. I don't know if they will. I would love to see a movie like Extraction 3 on the big screen. It's even with Extraction 1, what we were trying to do at the time, this was earlier on with Netflix, was to take something of real cinematic scale and deliver it to audiences at home. And it ended up working very, very well at the time because, it was COVID and people were stuck at home, and it gave them that experience that they may have been able to get in a theater when they couldn't. And I do love that. And I see so much value in all of the work that, is done across the streamers, and particularly Netflix, who has such a wide reach, but we work very often with, Prime Video as well, and making sure that you can deliver that to audiences all over the globe who may not be able to have that experience. And that's a really powerful, awesome thing. I don't know. I tend to, with our partners, look to them, for the guidance on what makes best sense for them. We want to be good partners to them. We want to just deliver really quality work and do what we can to bring as many people together.
And when you're in, you have, like you said, you have so many artists and executives and different kinds of people working together in this ecosystem. Does this ecosystem feed on each other? Are you having directors getting stunt advice from the Extraction team, and is this, and the visual effects from Avengers? How is that ecosystem all kind of merging over there in your beautiful offices at AGBO?
I love it because, we, like I said earlier, we're an independent space. We don't have, a deal anywhere. We don't even have first look. We're open to all, and we tend to work with the same collaborators a lot, right? And so we work very hard to achieve this, but we're very fortunate to have a robust slate with each of the different studios. And so there is a lot of cross-pollination. We do often have our studio partners down here to sort of, in a weird way, and this happened a couple of times on different projects we're working on. These companies are so big, and sometimes the storytelling that we're doing, it's storytelling that extends beyond a singular expression or even a singular medium. And so that brings together a lot of different teams, within the ecosystem of these studios. And so we will invite them all down to sort of give them, a singular experience of what it is that we're working on creatively. And it will oftentimes be the first time that many of these people who are at the same studio are meeting, which is pretty fun to be able to foster those connections for them and get them, sort of thinking in new ways. But, between the folks who work here consistently in terms of our collaborators, our artist collaborators, and then the ones that, tend to come in and out of our lives in different ways, it does feel like a home or a haven down here. We have folks come down and just try and crack their ideas. Some will just go work with our virtual production team just to hold a camera and sort of like work something out for themselves. We've done that also with directors, that we're helping just to prepare to go be on set. Frank Flowers, who I mentioned earlier, came down and was able to load in his set designs, on our stage. We use Unreal Engine, and he had 3D versions of it, and he had virtual camera, and he was able to walk a oneer through it and test it out. He did all of this prep work that way. So by the time he showed up on set in Australia with Karl and everybody, he had a lot more confidence because, he'd done the work to figure it out. And so you did mention earlier, like the bigger family here, it's an ongoing joke of the company. Like we're an extended family as a company. And then we have like the cousins outside of the company who tend to like show up a lot, which is fun.
So what is the North Star of AGBO? What is the philosophy that's guiding you on a daily basis? Because like you said, you have a robust slate at every studio. You have projects in every medium. You have your brothers off directing and people all over the world working for you. What is the North Star at AGBO?
Artists first. And I think if you ask most anyone here, they would say the same thing. And I think that's what keeps us all grounded and connected in a singular mission, no matter what our unique discipline is. And I think as producers, we work in teams. We work very hard on inviting that collaboration in, making sure that everybody who is surrounding this director, this writer, is able to utilize their discipline, their expertise to the best of their ability to help strengthen, the vision. And so I think, again, it's putting that artist first. It's making sure that all of us are coming to the table and layering, the ideas in service of what it is that, he or she wants to do.
And you mentioned you have a chief innovation officer. You mentioned you have a virtual stage. You use Unreal Engine. I heard you speak at an AI conference at the Academy. You're a writer from Cleveland. Where does this obsession with technology come from you and your brothers?
Yeah.
And walk me through what kind of commitment there is to that and why. Why is AGBO so invested, both financially and just in terms of the man hours you guys have put into technology?
I think like something that is a common and shared trait here amongst everybody at the company is scrappiness. Like everybody works hard and thinks outside of the box, because when you think outside of the box, that's when the unexpected can happen, and you can broaden your horizons in ways that you didn't even realize were possible. Technology can be a really useful tool in achieving that exact outcome. And I think like that idea that I put forth, that's our North Star, artists first, that becomes our North Star in the usage of technology. Any technology that we utilize and leverage is used to, if it best suits what it is that the artist is trying to do. So we do like Unreal Engine for animation, as an example. The reason that we like it for animation is because it allows the director to get right in there alongside the core collaborators and HODs and iterate in real time. And that iteration allows for more discovery. And we've had several, directors come in who are, they come from traditional pipeline. They're hand artists. There's still room for the hand for sure. It's just that there's a streamlining of the process that allows them to get further much earlier. And it has really cracked things open in an exciting way. But I think also what's really important, and for us with technology, is that just like technology may not be right for every creative pursuit, it may not be right for every artist either. So it's just being fluid and open to whatever it is that particular project or vision or artist begs of us. And then we sort of pride ourselves on having a Swiss Army knife of options that we can, lean into and provide for them. I think, certainly the same for AI. We felt compelled to get in there and learn about it ourselves because this was happening and it was happening so rapidly. And it felt to us that if it's going to happen and at this pace and scale and be led by technology companies that are not artists, the outcome is not going to be good. And so we really, took big steps to invite people in who were focused on ethical usage of AI, who could teach us about it, but then mostly, and this is really important here, they listen. And they listen with a lot of humility to us and understand what it is that is useful and what is not useful. And also that, like I just said with a project, no artist is going to need or want the same tools in their toolkit, right? And that extends to AI as well. And so if there are ever tools that are developed with AI, they can't be, one size fits all. They need to bend to the creative and the bespoke process of that creative. And so that's something that we strongly believe in too.
As someone who's scrappy and independent and comes from a producer's mindset and an artist's mindset, and you did, when you spoke at the AI conference at the Academy, you definitely led with, AI has to be used as a tool by artists. That's your North Star. Walk me through if you could wave a magic wand, your perfect use and vision for AI in your movies at AGBO or television.
Well, I'll tell you the ways in which I think it could be helpful. And then I think I have a pretty firm line in terms of how it's not helpful.
Please.
I think I think that an editor said this once, and I thought it was a very succinct and helpful way to frame it. When you can leverage AI to help streamline all of the aspects of your process that are laborious and painful so that you can get to the fun and the creativity and have more space for that, that to me is the best usage. And really it comes early on. That's also important for me. And for us as a company that, specializes in genre, we often are dealing with larger worlds that we are dreaming up from scratch. When you can have, a very organized catalog of what it is that you are, breaking out for yourself. I love that kind of support. What I don't need or ever want is an opinion. I just don't think that's where we're going to get anything, useful out of that.
You mentioned something, you sort of talked around it a couple of times, and I just want to dig into it a little bit more for people who may not be as technologically advanced as yourself. And the kind of keywords is starting early. You talked about giving this first-time director your virtual stage and letting him play inside of this virtual environment. You talked about Unreal Engine, and what Unreal Engine, for people who may not know, is an advanced form of visual effects that feels like a video game almost. You can iterate fight choreography, you can iterate blocking, you can put it inside of different locations. So the AI potentially could be useful and not upsetting the apple cart in the ways you're explaining. If you could take a director, it would actually, the way I think it would work is it would start with the director first. The director would start to lay out his or her movie in, let's just call it AI. Then an editor would come in and work with the scenes and sort of editing the movie. You could get a complete movie prevised, as it were. See the movie and go, wow, this movie is 3 hours long. Oh, wow, okay. Which always happens in a first cut of a movie. We always are dealing with, crap, this movie's 3 hours long. So that means that the movie can only probably be 2 hours long. Shoot, we shot an hour too much. So if there's a way to look at the movie in an elegant way, not it doesn't have to be photorealistic by any stretch, but see the thing and go, oh, that scene could go over here. You could then condense the movie to a more reasonable length, obviously leaving some pad because you want to be able to have creative moves depending on what the audience want. You could then start to bring in, let's say it's an action movie, you bring in your stunt coordinator, he or she would start to work with the action of the stunts. You can manipulate that in such a way. Go to a close up here, do this, that, the other. Really hone in on the fight choreography. So, like as you said, when Karl Urban's standing there, you're not going, wonder what we should do today. I mean, should we jump off a building or should we, crash a motorcycle through a plate glass window? Just being able to really hone in on that, those creative decisions. Then you could theoretically bring in all of your HODs one at a time. You could bring in your hair and makeup people. They could experiment with different looks on this AI character and say, oh, the updo works better there, or yeah, let's shave that person's head, or what if you didn't? So that those decisions could be made early on in an intimate way with your HODs. Hair, wardrobes, certainly you could try different wardrobes on people. All of that to be said is you could theoretically then have a movie you could watch before you go out and shoot your movie, which would be helpful in many ways. One, it would be helpful because you could really hone in on the days you need to make that vision, and you've seen the vision, and other people have seen the vision. And as you said, because AGBO is so much about collaboration, you invite collaborators in at that early stage to get everybody's opinion, and those opinions, if you have smart, talented, great people, will just make the movie better. And if you're going into a movie already at at the 70-yard line as opposed to at the 10-yard line, that's a win.
Exactly.
And then it'd help you with days. And again, hopefully not shooting an hour that you're never going to use. It would help you in post because you could theoretically cut to camera because the shots you need, especially in fight choreography and stunts, which will shorten the post process. And visual effects can be further along because you're already seeing, I see what we're going to need. We're going to need this background. Oh, we're going to need this, as you guys did with Electric State. These robots are going to be here, and you're not wasting a lot of stuff where you build this whole environment, you put the robots in, you go, you know what, we don't need that 5 minutes. And that's when you want to kill yourself because that's just money thrown out the window. So in terms of all of that, that is to me the perfect use for AI because it replaces nobody. And it just moves it makes the whole process more efficient, more creative, more collaborative, and less wasteful.
100% to all of it. And the thing that you keep touching on through all of those different sort of usages that we were talking about, like inviting in the costume designers and the hair, every single aspect of what you just went through was about finding creative alignment early. And that is gold. And that is a massive money saver. It also is a massive win insofar as allowing this big group that is coming together to manifest this director's vision to do it to the best of their ability. And I think like that's been one of the most exciting things to see is that, directors, writers, anybody that has an idea. I've worked with artists who work in other mediums. There's an idea that's inside their head that they want to articulate in a manner that really crystallizes for others what it is that they're seeking. They're not dictating to others, go do this thing, but they are conveying, through words, through imagery that they find, here's what I'm after. And if you can iterate that to a point where it truly crystallizes what it is that you're looking for, it just empowers those other people to say, I get it. And then they get to go and interpret it in the way that they would and far sooner, and maybe with less frustration and back and forth than others. And you're dead on that it does really. And that's been probably the biggest surprise for me and delight about it because I did go into this not leaning in 100%. I went into it wanting to understand it. But one of the biggest surprises I found was how much it fosters collaboration. And that is incredible.
Well, Matt, you and I both been there. We've both been on stage. We're doing hair and makeup tests and wardrobe tests where you stand there for 5-6 days and they just cycle through different hair and makeup looks, different outfit looks. Well, imagine if you could do that in the pre-production process earlier and say, well, what if that outfit was yellow? Boom, it's yellow. Oh, what about if it was green? It's green. What about if it was a little shorter, longer? What if it was this, that? What if the hair was you could do that with the costume and makeup person and hair person. So you're not replacing that person. That person is designing it, giving you their expertise, and you can cycle through it quicker. That's one. The other thing is you and I have both been in vans getting car sick for 12 hours a day, visiting different locations. So imagine if you had a scene that was on a street, and you went, what if it was on a rooftop?
Yeah.
And you could put it on a rooftop. What if it was, in a river boat? Boom. So you can like hone in on, wow, I really like this riverboat idea. That's something that we didn't think about. Because the last thing I want to do is be standing on a roof in Gold Coast of Australia and someone go, what if it's on a riverboat? Then I'm like, okay, let's go fucking find a riverboat, and we got to drive over there. Like, if you could do all that, that is the best use for of AI in my opinion. Because again, I am all for technology helping make things more efficient and more collaborative, which is the AGBO way, and also bringing in artists to give their opinion early on. Because the last thing I want to do
That's right.
is call in the wardrobe person on set, so that person has to drive 30 minutes from base camp to talk about some situation, because that's just 500 crew people standing around going, couldn't we have dealt with this like a year ago when we were prepping?
Right. That's exactly right.
And then all of this to be said of what this podcast is named after, which is producers.
Yeah.
So you guys are incredible producers. You have your brothers have more producing credits than they do anything else, which is I love. And you are a producer, and you care about producers, and you're collaborative, and you're an artist, and your brothers are artists, and they're producers, and we're a nervous bunch, producers. And so what's being told through the press and what's being whispered in the hallways is nobody, first of all, knows what the hell we do, which is shocking to me because I have almost 200 hours talking about this topic, and I think I've explained it up 150 times. Secondarily, there's this vibe sometimes, not all, but there's certain studios and places where, do you need producers? Like, really? What do they do? Right? Oh, can AI replace producers? That would be good. There's this feeling in our community that, we don't have a union and we don't have a lot of leverage unless we're the AGBO. Then you have some leverage sometimes when you have great projects. You see it all. You guys are making really expensive movies. You're making smaller movies. You're making television. You're doing everything. You're bringing in producers. You're collaborating with producers. Where do you come out on this? Where do you come out on being producers, working with producers, and kind of where you see the business headed, and what use will this line item be called producer? I know that's a giant question. We can break it into smaller parts.
We can break it down. I mean, bottom line, producers are 100% necessary. I do think that, we are at a disadvantage because we don't have the same protections in place that other critical players have, albeit, the directors, actors, writers, and their respective guilds. It's a hard thing, because we're a company of producers. We approach every project with teams, right? And so the way we do our work is, Anthony and Joe produce across everything. Their main focus is what they're directing. And so the way the three of us as a team divvy up is, when they're directing, I am taking charge on, everything else. And so we work as a group here across every project. So we are producers, but to your point, then we have partners sometimes who are producers. And also there's different, even though somebody has a producer title, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're all contributing in the same ways. And so then you sort of like have that to reconcile. And it's tricky stuff. You want to make sure that, look, at the end of the day, our job is to carry this charge through. The studio is asking for a film to be made and delivered to them and released and just, do well for them. Like, we are the stewards of that process. And so I think that that can't ever go away. Otherwise I think projects go away in general, right?
When you guys are producing something and you put your names on it, what is your or you're partnering with producers, what is your expectation of what a producer does?
I can tell you that, like, my philosophies on it, which I think, extend to our team here, is that a producer's job is not to know everything. a producer actually, in my mind, and this correlates to my job as CCO at the company, right? And I think anybody who's leading a company at any scale, it may seem that they are not in the weeds on every single little thing that's happening. I hope, and at least, in healthy situations, it seems that way because they actually are across it all, but then they are allowing the folks who have the expertise to deal with any, given, issue that may come up to take charge and run with it. And so I look at our role as being, first and foremost, very open and available, highly communicative, but really doing a lot of listening to understand, what the needs are at any given moment. It's gathering context, and then it's taking that context and making the most informed decision and doing it in ideally a calm and thoughtful manner. And when you do it for long enough, you start to know what's coming down the line and you can get ahead of it. And, so you don't always have to wait for like the fire to happen, obviously. But I think that, my rule is in general, and this is my rule with my brothers as well. They will make the best decision that they can based on the context that they have. If they don't have the full context and they've given you their best answer based on the piece that they have, that's not necessarily, it's actually not the best solution, right? And so I think that as a producer, that's something I keep in mind often, is making sure that I've collected full context before making any decision about how to proceed.
I mean, the hardest part of our job when we've done it for so many years and there's talent in doing it is you may not even know we did it.
That's exactly right.
We're like Homeland Security when Homeland Security was good. We're like Homeland Security that nothing happened.
Right.
And so we did all the things we needed to do, but nothing happened. And so sometimes studio executives, if they don't have expertise of looking under the hood, are like, what did you do? Nothing happened. And I've said this story a couple times in this podcast. It's funny because they'll say, my favorite part of the job is when something bad happens. And I love that when people come to me with a problem, I'm like, that's the worst part of my job. My best part of my job is I solved that problem 4 months ago.
That's right.
And it would have come up and it didn't happen. And I've had actors say to me, close to the end of production, why are you still here, man? Nothing happened. I'm like, great. First of all, it's like walking out onto the pitching mound in the seventh inning and going, you're pitching a no-hitter, right? Like, you're going to jinx me. And number two, that is the whole point. The whole point is we have done our jobs to the best of our ability to allow all of these creative, amazing people to do their best work. That is when we are best, is when they have the freedom, the time, and the resources to be their best. And so it's hard because, and we don't have a union, and also we're not in a generation where we're tooting our own horns like it used to be. Some of back in the day, the producers were at the front. It was they were all the bells and whistles were around them. They owned movie studios because a lot of times when the unions are going to go on strike, they say they're striking against the producers, which aren't us, it's the studios. So all of these things have gathered to a point where when you're really talented and good at your job, sometimes no one knows
exactly right.
what you did.
That's right. And then you did it well, to your point, right? Like that's how I feel. But it's like being it's like being the parent, the thankless parent sometimes. And I find that a majority of the skill sets that have served me well as a producer are skill sets that I really work on as a parent at home and that I also utilize when I was teaching. And they're, really all aimed at doing exactly what you just said, sort of empowering people to do their job to the best of their ability without obstacles or challenges. And, it's like, how can you help this group of individuals thrive so that the thing we're building is the best it can be? And yes, you always want to deliver it to your partner under budget with no problems, all of that fun stuff. But then when you do that, it's sort of like, unless it's under budget, then they'll say something, right?
Right.
They're gonna
When
do-
everything went well, they went, "What did I need you for?" And you're like,
Exactly.
"That's
Exactly.
exactly the point.
Yeah,
That's exactly why you needed me."
that's right. It's so true. Ugh.
Well, I thank you so much. You've been so generous with your time, and I'm really in awe of what you and your brothers have created, and I'm a huge fan of all that you guys do. I always like to end on the same question, but before I get to that last question, I want to ask you one thing, which is you're such champion of artists and new voices. What advice would you have for somebody just getting into the business right now? That theater student in Cleveland that's sitting around her dinner table right now with her brothers. What advice would you have for somebody getting into the business right now, given where everything is?
It's a great question. I think that, sometimes the focus, as you said, given where everything is, the focus can feel a really negative, a bit doomsday. And I think the best thing that this next generation of filmmakers can do coming into this is to treat this moment as the beginning of something and have that energy and fire. And I do this at the company, quite frankly. And Anthony and Joe and I have done it as a trio, even, though we have this long history and we've done the things that we've done, there are moments where we look at each other and say, oh, we're just starting something new here. And I think that as an industry and as artists, we have to keep that spark alive continuously so that everybody's coming in with the same fervor and really wanting, to hit the ground running. I know that's not exactly practical advice. That's more so like, spirit advice, but
Yeah.
I think it's really important, and I think what I oftentimes say, because we do we host a lot of university students here and do workshops and classes and things. And so we talk about this. What I say oftentimes to them is be open to curveballs, which I think as producers, we need to do always, right? Because we get them all day long, every day. And career-wise, a curveball may come your way, and it may be very different from the idea or the path that you had for yourself. And sometimes if there is something about that curveball that speaks to you and you open yourself up to accept it and you pivot your path, when I look back on my own journey, those are the moments where I grew the most, I learned the most, I found that I had such deep love for something I didn't realize. That's how I became a producer ultimately instead of a writer. And I still, love to champion other writers and dig in on, their writing with them as an executive. But, I think that you referenced it early on in the discussion when Anthony and Joe called me and said, we're going to start this company and would you come work at it? I thought that, what am I going to, I'm not an executive. I'm a television writer producer. And I think that opening myself up to this opportunity, coming here, doing this, it's been, the privilege of my life. I work with such incredible people. I work with, such incredible artists. And so, yeah, I guess I say that oftentimes to younger people, just be open.
Yeah, and the other thing is, there's so many people saying, "Oh, it's so hard now. Oh, it's so hard now." The odds of three kids from an immigrant family coming from Cleveland having the insane amount of success that you three have had is pretty unlikely, and you did it. And we need young people to dream big and to come into this business to become the next AGBO, because that's going to be the next generation of new voices and what's going to make the new Avengers and the new Extractions and then in those things. So we need these kids to dream big. And yeah, it's always been hard. There's no guarantees in anything, but yeah.
Yeah. And I will.
Go ahead.
Sorry, just to add to that, because it always is hard. And when you get to that place, in the same way that I mentioned earlier, Anthony and Joe had that opportunity from Steven Soderbergh and George Clooney, to be able to turn around and give it to others. That's important. And I hope that, this next generation comes in and they all knock it out of the park and then they turn around and they pull the next one in.
Yeah. Well, the last question I always like to ask everybody at the end here is best memory on set.
I alluded to it earlier. I wouldn't have known at the time this was my best memory, but I look back on it fondly. It's probably a collection of a few memories. But when I was in Cleveland and I was in high school and Anthony and Joe were just starting to experiment with filming, I remember in that film pieces that they did, my friend and I played schoolgirls, and my brother Joe played this creep in the movie. And as we were walking by, we were in Catholic schoolgirl uniforms, and he took his cane. And of course, he had to do it to me because I was related to him, and we're like 15 years old. But he tries to flip my skirt up, and then my friend pushes him away. And it ended up, that moment is like part of it was the poster, for the film at Slam Dance when they premiered there. And I think like when I look back on that day, and we were in Little Italy, in our hometown, and just thinking like, this moment will one day lead to where we are today, right? Or like my mom and my sister and I would cook food and bring it at 2 a.m, for their crew of like 7 people. Or Anthony would shoot, one night he grabbed me in high school, and he had just gone into film school, actually post pieces at Columbia, and he would shoot like a student film with me, in the park. Those are the moments that like I look back on and just really appreciate, as you said earlier, the road that we've traveled.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to do this. And thank you for doing this podcast. It's incredible. It's a really valuable resource for all of us. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning in for this episode of The Producer's Guide. If you're a fan of this podcast, make sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends and family. And if you got any questions about producing, send me a DM on X at Todd_Garner. I want to thank my producer, Steve Delamater. And until next week, I'm Todd Garner. See you then.